is the lake level correlating with the weeds too?
Yeah, you know,
I mean, is it better to have it lower or higher?
it's better to have it stable.
Not,
Because
not fluctuate?
if things fluctuate and changes take place in that photic zone where the sunlight can penetrate, so let's say your water clears up and you get, you know, you get pretty clear water, but what's the most opportunistic plant? Invasives, the bad ones. So the more changes we have, the native plants can't keep up with those changes as fast, but the invasives sure can. So like drawdowns and things, sometimes people use that as a management method, but unfortunately you can knock out a lot of your native plants doing drawdowns, freezing those out, there's seed banks, and what happens is you get a monoculture of more invasives that when you bring the water levels back up, because they can move fast. So the water level fluctuations that you guys have out here, I don't think it's any detriment, it's very minor.
It's 12 inches.
Excuse me?
It's 12 inches.
Is it 12? Okay.
Well, I was just curious, cause it's like, you know, I keep hearing the 15th all the time, but, you know, I argue with the guy on the channel, he likes it high, I like it low.
That's
The
because
only-
we can't get into the channels because they're filled.
I understand that.
Yeah.
But, I mean, years ago, it wasn't that high. I know that for a fact. And now it's, I got, you know, my next door neighbor has put in a $10,000 seawall and it's useless now.
Yeah.
He did it years ago. It's over that. Yeah.
I look at rain commissioners.
How long
But
ago,
my
how long
que-
ago was the water low?
What's
I've
that?
lived here 20 years and it's always been the same. So how long ago was it lower?
I don't know how long ago
Probably
it
before they
was.
rebuilt the dam.
Well, the channel, that is an issue that came up in our last meeting, that the lake has moved away from the people in the channel.
The lake has moved away.
That it's hard, at some points in the channel, so you can't, it's not really a channel.
The channels.
Well, I
for
think
them.
all 4 channels are that way,
Yeah.
to be totally honest with you.
And that was one of the things that residents wanted us to look at, into. Is there opportunities for grants for dredging to bring it back to what it was intended?
I think there, if you was to address that, you would make about 100 and some people very, very happy just to look at it and see if there was possibilities.
And that,
Well, what I'm looking at is I'm calling this guy back and forth on the water level. I argue all the time in fun. But when I'm seeing 4 days of rain and the board's in, I'm going, my word, shouldn't we let some of this water out so it doesn't become a problem?
yeah,
But in all honesty, the problem isn't the dam, the problem is the embankment on the road that's behind that, because when that plugs up, that backs up the lake. It is not the dam, it's the
yeah,
culvert.
Well, I do notice a difference when the board
Yeah,
goes up
you
and
will,
down.
but when it hits the culvert in the back, that's when the lake
Yeah.
backs up.
Mr. Acker is right, that it is an issue that we can add to a future agenda to kind of formulate a plan to address, or at
Is
least
that
look
on Brown
into.
Road?
Yes.
Yeah,
That'd be the inter-county drain.
That
system there.
is the issue when we have water, it is not the dam.
yeah, yeah.
So,
You
yeah,
got
that wouldn't
water
be
as
anything to do
in
with
too
the
much
lake work.
water?
What's that?
Water as in too much water?
I don't think, we had a flood, what, 14, 15 years ago?
2000.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay. That came up 4 feet, okay? And that caused a lot of problems. I'm not arguing with that. But it wasn't the dam that stopped it, it was the culvert that was
Right.
on the road.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for that culvert being so small, we would not have had a problem.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I wasn't aware of that.
That
And
culvert.
Jim and I both are new on, that's our joint.
Because I don't like it when you guys screw with the dam. I'd like it to stay in all year round if it's possible, because if
Legally,
it sounds like it causes the weeds to grow more, that's an issue.
like Jason said, consistency is what
Right.
we're striving for. And the law is pretty specific on the lake level. It's really
By
archaic law.
elevation.
It's like from the 1900s or something, and you need like a judge to set the lake level. And as we know, the ecosystem, the environment changes. So it's a deficiency in our law that we can't act as fast as what some of our residents would like. But we're doing the best that we can. But I can tell you that we can talk about the issues that you and your neighbors want to talk about at a future meeting.
Okay.
So how do you set the meetings? I don't know, is it monthly? Are they only special meetings? What?
Well, legally, we have to meet at least once a year, to go over the budget. And maybe it's not even legally, but we do need to look at that plan. So at minimum, we do it once a year, but, usually it's a couple times a year. Residents have, some questions on what's going on, then we'll meet again. So I would like to continue that practice. I don't think we need to meet monthly or bi-monthly, but a couple times a year.
We missed it last year because
Yeah.
the chairman and vice chair both resigned, so
We
there
had
was
a lot of
nobody,
changeover, and
nobody knew who was supposed to do what.
you gotta have a quorum to have a meeting too.
And the law sets the membership of this board, and so I'm on it by statute with state law, so I'm not going anywhere. Unless I get voted out. Yeah,
Going back to what Jason was talking about, we were asked the question about the fish. I don't think we have a real problem with the fish problem, as everybody makes out, when you have 3 to 5 bass tournaments a week on this lake, we have fish.
Right.
I mean, just look at it, I mean, we have fish, and they're not bothering the fish.
Yeah.
I mean, if you had that many bass in this lake, they're eating a ton of fish.
Hey, Jason, you talked about the variations in the lake level. Now, are you talking like through the summer?
I'm talking intentional drawdowns.
Okay,
Is
so-
sometimes
so you think
what
it's
you're
that-
doing is how far do you drop it? And-
Right, we drop it a foot
Yeah,
in
I'm talking lakes that
October.
drop it several feet,
they're-
that you're trying to
Oh, yeah.
expose the whole shorelines
Yeah.
for the intent
Oh,
of
I
weed
got you, yeah.
control.
They'd be
that-
disappointed if we did that.
Yeah, that's a scary path. But the point still stands, and what you're doing, there's reasons for it, it's a different world, but my
I
point
just
is,
didn't know if that's something that may, if it's a certain time of the year that it's more detrimental, people can
when
come back
you,
and talk.
I mean, all that's done by law, you have in statute.
Yeah,
so
but they can adjust it,
When you
As
draw
needed.
go
down,
through the courts.
when you draw it down,
We draw it down October 15th, the board's
most
at
of
the
your
BL.
native plants have SNEST
That's what I
already.
figured, it wouldn't have much of a.
Yeah, and you bring them back up at what time of the year?
May 15th, so, okay,
so
that's, I
Thunder,
didn't think so.
you have a question?
Yeah, what, the mussels that are in the lake,
Zebra.
yeah, are the zebras or the other kind of mussels, what effect does that have on the cleanliness of the lake compared to what your chemicals do? And with the growth of the weeds, or plant life, I should say,
Native mussels are desirable. They're gonna filter feeders and things, and part of the ecology of the lake. Having those is fine. Unfortunately, there are a lot of new invasive
Right.
mussels. Zebra mussels have been around forever, and there's no good solutions to control them. We've done experimental treatments, but there's nothing there that's ready to come to the table. So, one, native mussels and clams and things, and seeing those variations, and you'll see those population changes over time.
these are the little ones that congregate on your dock, in your
Your
boat.
zebra mussels.
Yeah,
Yeah, and unfortunately, we've been I've done work with the state of Michigan and Lake Huron and other, over in Illinois and Minnesota, experimental treatments. They use a bacteria to control them, but it's so costly and they can't produce enough to bring it to the market to use it. The only option, once again, comes to high rates of copper sulfate, high rates. And when you do it at those high rates, you kill the snails, you can kill other invertebrates too. So, there's no solutions yet for zebra mussels.
Jason, do those mussels, I understand they filter the water, do those have any effect on your treatments that you put out there? Do they also filter that treatment
Well,
out?
No, they're not impacting that. The zebra mussels can create changes within ecosystems because being filter feeders, they feed on algae, plankton and things. If they desire green algae, family green algae versus blue greens. So lakes that are polluted, and all lakes have some blue greens in them, but they'll shift it from a balanced lake and they'll have just spit out the blue greens. The next thing you know, you have high levels of Microcystis, Anabina, toxins and other.
And that's when you
things.
get the swimmers advisory, or the no swim advisory.
Yeah, that's correct. And I haven't seen too many lakes shut down because of HABs, harmful algae blooms. It's a hot topic. It can happen. It's not very, very common. E. coli, or fecal coliform, that's more of a thing you see in the beaches, and we look at it on the lake also. And generally, most lakes are fine, but the media pump it up. Even like HABs, harmful algae blooms and blue-green issues, it's not very common, but the media makes it into a big deal. Well,
Not you, Bonnie, we're talking about,
Generally, no, just kidding.
I have another question.
Yeah.
Okay. When you go around the lake, and we go around the lake a lot. Scott
Hold up
does
for a
too.
minute. I get a
There
chance.
are a lot of weeds above. We noticed last year. A lot of grass type. And a lot of people complained about that. You know, say, guys, down here, past Eagle Point, that you gotta watch it. You gotta back your motor up. Look
What
at
time of year was this?
all year last year.
Yeah, last year was a rough one. I know we
August, September.
You know, I'd have to look back at the notes. I do know that you had a decent amount of milfoil at the end of the season, and we got it under control. It was down, under control, and then it started popping back up. Now there's some native species. You have Richardson's pondweed, some eelgrass, some Cara and things. That's the one thing that having us on some boat rides together, you're gonna be able to see that. Some species, native plants, and I've seen it before, we can't treat them. If a native species is growing in waters deeper than 5 feet, I legally can't treat those plants. And sometimes native plants that are growing in areas that I might be able to treat, it might not be a good idea to treat them. Or we have funding issues that we can't treat them. Non-residential areas, I cannot treat any native plants or algae. And you guys, most of your areas developed. But, so there's some limitations, some things going on. It could be a plant that should have been treated. I don't know for sure.
Now, back, I don't know how many years ago, you had a machine that came through.
Harvester?
The harvester.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a tool which we still utilize some here and there. Once milfoil is controlled, because you don't want to use a milfoil or a harvester for milfoil,
Right.
and you have native plants that are a nuisance, yes, you could use that tool to cut that vegetation. I think actually it's water stargrass too. Things have changed in some of the herbicides that are available to us, and we can be more effective than a harvester in controlling those plants. If you remember the harvesting days, whenever we do it, we help out some, and there's floaters and fragments created, and then the rest of the people are just hate it.
Yeah.
And we used to have 3 machines, I'm down to 1, because there's other methods that we can do things that we couldn't do many years ago. So when, if some days something happens, we need to use harvester, yeah, we'll bring the harvester out there.
But like you said, doesn't that create like the milfoil, doesn't that?
If milfoil was, we're not gonna bring a machine into a lake that has
Okay.
moderate to high densities of milfoil. We wanna treat it before the harvester comes
Yeah.
out there.
and see, like, this is the type of science that, like, I'm not familiar with,
Yeah.
and you guys learn from experience, that, gosh, if there's a lot of weeds, I'd wanna take a machine out there and chop them down, but.
Like mowing your lawn.
Mhm.
And then you're blowing them out. I mean, we do collect 90% of the vegetation, that biomass comes out of the lake, which is kind of a good thing. But there's some, the fragments that are created right at that time, people
Right.
go nuts. It's just not pretty.
Mhm. So, there, any other, board questions?
Yeah.
I would
Oh, we don't have any.
like to speak on the spraying issue.
Oh, this is, other business, and we don't have any more public comment opportunities. Do you have a quick comment, Mr. Fillion?
Well, the spraying issue, we haven't had spawning bluegills on Jordan Lake in 5 consecutive years. This would be the 6th year. The DEQ was out last year with the DNR. They didn't find any spawning fish on Jordan Lake when they were here, other than a few bass that were here and there. We had a roundtable meeting that you attended in September, and we had professionals here, the fisheries division, and a geologist as well. The recommendation from the DNR was that we didn't spray copper compounds during the spawning season, and that the use of chelated copper and copper sulfate together was more damaging.
Yep, and that actually was a DNR employee who was not on the clock, who was not speaking on behalf of the DNR, right?
No, he is the top biologist for the DNR.
I remember it a little differently, but.
Talking to Robert, Robert is on the same page with me that we should have a moratorium on spraying copper between the 25th of May and the 25th of June, so that we can have spawning bluegills on Jordan Lake. There is one other thing that was found that is indicative of copper. Jordan Lake has an extreme population of yellow perch. The reason for that extreme population of yellow perch is the period of time in the season that they spawn. Perch spawn in mid-April to late April. They skip the copper treatments, and that's why we're seeing the high population of perch in Jordan Lake that we don't see in bluegills.
Okay.
So I would like to ask that this board impose the moratorium between the May 25th and June 25th.
Thank you for your comments. Is there any other business to come before the board?
It's kind of the same business. I wanted to bring that up. I think as a board, like I told Mr. Fillion, we need to discuss this as a board. But I think as far as the bluegill, they're spawning, it's a big issue. And we need to really look at that. I know we gotta find that balance. You know, because I know we have the water skiers, you know, and the swimmers. But I think we need to find that balance too. We got to look about that with the bluegill. There is something behind it, and I'm not saying anything, Jason, but you are selling chemicals. But we need to look at this.
This wasn't an issue that was put on the agenda, so if we're gonna get into some discussion about it, I think it would be best that we do it at another time, so.
I'd like to touch base on it now, if it's something that, my thought is get Jason's, I mean, is it possible to wait?
Well,
I mean,
I
how
know that
detrimental will
we're
it be?
here looking at Jordan Lake and the residents of Jordan Lake. We manage lakes, hundreds and hundreds of lakes for decades. And then there's the whole rest of the nation managing algae with copper-based. Unfortunately, the only tool for managing algae is a copper-based substance. And you guys have a lot of algae growth out there. If we were truly impacting spawning, we wouldn't have bluegill. I mean, why? All these other lakes, we're not having issues. We're having terrific reproduction. There's bluegill all over the place. You know, it's awesome that you have perch. I think that's really cool. So if there was a true common thread of our copper treatments impacting specifically our bluegill spawning time, we would see this. We would see this on other lakes, and we're not seeing this.
Then how
Now-
come it would happen on Jordan Lake and not any other lake?
I don't know. I don't know. I guess you'd have to, one, use science, do some electroshocking, some, study it for a few years to verify what's going on with your aging. You have to grab your bluegill, do some trap nets, trap nets or electroshocking, look at the scales.
Was the advice of the DNR that it gave to you, he basically spoke to you. The advice that he gave you was that not using copper compounds during the spawning season was the best method, and that using chelated copper and copper together was very damaging, and that they were using less copper in their holding ponds to move fish than you were applying to Jordan Lake.
Again, this is a discussion item that I mean, if we wanna debate the science between ourselves after the meeting, I think that,
I think I should, one more point.
one, okay,
The DNR Fisheries participates in the approval of our
Yes.
permit. If
Mhm.
the agency had an issue with these treatments, they would implement those restrictions upon us.
yeah.
And there are a few water bodies where the fisheries does implement restrictions on our permits. So if this, which they have to approve these things too, the DNR Fisheries, Brian Gunderman, his crew. So if in fact there was something there, it would be on our permits. Okay.
Actually, the DEQ is the one who issues your permit.
Is there any other business to come before the board?
Well, this would be under other business though.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't have to be specific.
Yeah, this is other business.
Why are you opposed to a moratorium?
How, what would be the detriment of waiting? I mean, when is the next scheduled application?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
Blue Lake.
Right, but the moratorium is from May, what, 25th?
25th to June
June
25th.
My
Would be
recommendation is to not tie our hands and manage the water body. I respect the thought and concern.
Is there you got documentation that says that they haven't been spawning for the last few years?
It's noticed by the residents. There are many residents who have expressed the same. One is sitting here. There are also people who have sent me private PM messages. They ask that their names not be disclosed for whatever reason. They fear being chastised in the public. There is one other person sitting in this room that knows that I'm being truthful with you, other than God.
I know that you are being sincere in your desire to see chemical treatment stopped
Not completely, no, because
on the
I
lake.
want invasive species handled. But I don't want you to be spraying copper when we have spawning fish.
But what we are debating now is whether to go against the recommendation of the treatment company that we have hired to treat the lake. You have a disagreement with the company that we've hired. And so what Jim is bringing up is, do we want to abandon or go against the professional recommendation that has been used on other lakes? I'm not ready to do that.
But again, you don't live on Jordan Lake.
Again, I don't live on Jordan Lake, but
We would like our fish to spawn here again in the spring, particularly the bluegills.
What, like I say, when is the next treatment planned?
When the next bloom starts to take place. I don't know when that's gonna take place. I mean, on one hand, I would be very happy to say, okay, but I know if we don't treat, the lake is gonna be trashed with algae, and we're gonna have an uproar on our hands. I could wait now for that date, and then the board can decide to proceed.
Why don't we try it and see if we have an uproar and an
Oh, you will
explosion?
have an uproar.
Yeah, you would have.
yeah.
I'm a fisherman, my guys are ecologists, biologists, as I mentioned, we're all scientists running this business. We appreciate our fish and our fisheries and want to maintain that diversity. There are new rules in place, as I mentioned, when we see spawning take place by law,
Mhm.
we gotta get out of, we gotta move it to the best, and we always did that practice anyways. To a certain extent, I appreciate the comments and
We've
concerns.
already went down the road last year after Brian Gunderman expressed that in the newspaper that he was more concerned about the second treatment. But on the day they were out, they found no spawning bluegills. And he expressed that he was more concerned about the next treatment that Jason is explaining to you now. The bluegills never did spawn last year after the second treatment.
So,
So we're gonna go for a 6 year of no spawning? That's not good.
well,
Here's a
we,
question for you then. If they're not spawning, what the world are the bass eating? They eating the yellow perch? But they're,
See, yeah,
but
this
they
is,
can't be
this is a
using them
bigger
because they're getting
issue
more and more.
about whether to use
We have a
chemicals.
consensus of people around the lake.
My
Well, this month, though, it's
Including
our
one of the
choice to
board
say,
members that
let's
isn't
kinda hold
present.
off, we don't need it for
He's
that
actually
period,
told
that's
the
what.
Well,
board
our
before,
expert that we hired
all the
is telling
crappie are
us
dead
we need
and
to
no
do.
fish
Okay,
don't
but why
swim.
did the crappie die? Think about this.
For us.
Before
They
you,
died from
But-
oxygen depletion.
okay, but
There's-
what
there's
happened that
thousands of-
year?
Of residents around.
What
this area.
happened the year the crappie died?
Fluoridone treatment.
No. We had a flood.
There-
And we had a flood, and when we had that
No, we
flood,
had a flood.
all the
Can-
pesticides and things from the farm came into the lake, and that's,
There's no theory to back that up.
Could I make a recommendation to the board
Yeah, I think you're
that
nuts.
I provide you a proposal for a fisheries evaluation to verify the spawning and aging of your bluegill?
Yeah, I mean, it's well worth checking it, just.
That we can
Dave
do,
brings
and
a
then we
good
can
point, if they're
verify.
not spawning, we need to know why.
There
Yeah,
has
it's
been,
Basically, we need to collect bluegill,
How much does that
scale
Oh,
Yeah,
them,
what's it
age them,
cost?
and then, I'll give you a proposal. I would subcontract out, you can do trap netting and things, but I probably go through electroshocking. But I will give you
Yeah,
a
so much
proposal
cost.
so we can get
It's not.
Yeah.
There
some
has-
science.
Yeah.
Can you
there has been a
estimate
targeted monitoring
what you're
request.
thinking? I mean, are you talking 10,000 or are you talking 200?
No, I probably, for a lake of this size, to get a good spectrum of things going on, my guess is gonna be several thousand, 4, 5, 6,000 to do something.
Before we discuss that, a targeted monitoring request was submitted to the Water Resources Division by my